Yeah, I want to talk about how we're designing the future of learning at ISS. And this word design is a really important word and one that we'll come back to in just a few minutes. But first, anytime I talk about the future of learning, I like to ask a question which at first seems very unrelated. And that is, I like to ask people to think about the major successes that they've had in their lives or the major challenges that they've overcome. And in asking lots of people this, the response that I often get is pretty similar. That the most important successes, those major events in life, or the ways that people have overcome challenges, often happen as the result of some things that they couldn't exactly predict, which makes sense. We're not particularly good at predicting the future. And those things often happen as the result of collaboration or relationships with other people. So the response is overwhelmingly pretty similar, that when we reflect back on the most important successes in our lives or the challenges that we have, we're not really able to predict them accurately. And they often happen as the result of important collaborations or relationships with other people. But if I reflect back on my own educational experience, and I think this is true for most people, their education was more or less predictable and occurred in isolation. So if I was a student in the classroom, I pretty much knew what was happening next. I could flip ahead in the textbook. So the question I want to ask today is, what would it look like if we were able to more accurately prepare students for the types of futures that we know that they're likely to encounter? So the question might be, why bother changing? Why bother looking at the way we are teaching? A few weeks ago, a student came to me with an essay that they had written and hadn't performed particularly well on. And the truth is, this isn't a strength of this student, writing these kinds of essays. And the student asked a really simple question, but I thought it was really quite important. The student asked, why is so much of our work in the IB program, which we're teaching in high school, so much of it is graded based on a few written essays that we do at the end of the program? This is a really important question because the truth is this student is really phenomenal at giving formal presentations, at public speaking, at being able to get people working collaboratively in groups. And I've seen the student demonstrate their knowledge of the exact same material that was on this essay in a conversation or a discussion with a group of students just a couple of days before this conversation. So it's really important that a school can provide an opportunity for learners to demonstrate what they know in multiple ways. So you might say that this is a common situation, that students just have to write some tests. And you know, this has been this way over time in our formal education system. So what's changed? Well, the truth is a lot has changed. And we talk about the way that, for example, technology has influenced our educational systems, but I think it's important to underline really just how powerful this change has been. When I started teaching in 2010, there were no cell phones in the classroom. In fact, the school I was teaching at didn't have Wi-Fi. And there were two sources of information in that classroom, a textbook and me as a teacher. And so without technology, the students, if they needed something, if they needed to understand something, they mostly asked me. As a result, most of my time was spent teaching at the front of the room, giving students some raw information. A few years later, I changed schools. And at first, honestly, when I was in a school with wireless internet and students with laptops or iPads in the classroom, I was quite terrified because my role and my identity as a teacher had now shifted. And it took me a long time to understand what's really a basic truth, that I'm not going to have more information than a computer. I'm not going to be able to recall more data or facts about a piece of literature or a poetic form than the students can look up on the internet quicker than I can write it on the board. But here's a really important opportunity, because instead of spending my time sharing information with students, I can spend my time helping them understand how to apply that information and create new knowledge out of it. And as we think back about the student example that I gave to you earlier, those are exactly the kinds of things that that student was really quite good at, being able to apply knowledge and create new information. If we think about our own lives, the challenges, the successes that we have, they often come as a result of being able to identify new opportunities. So we ought to use our time in education focusing on helping students apply their knowledge in real-world settings across a wider range of learning goals. While on one hand it's understandable that teachers may be apprehensive or fearful about changes in the classroom, especially as the result of technology, on the other hand, we should recognize this as an opportunity to redesign the way we teach in our classrooms to make better use of our time and to prepare our students for the world of the future. And so that's exactly what we're up to here at ISS. We're designing the future of learning, and we've been engaged in this process over the last few years using an external accreditation process called ACE. And very briefly, ACE is an opportunity for us to kind of examine the most important elements of teaching and learning at the school, to identify some of the places that we have strengths, and also identify some opportunities to continue to develop and learn as an organization. And just because we're interested in learning and developing ourselves as an organization doesn't mean or suggest that we don't have a number of strengths already working at the school. I was really fortunate to be able to study curriculum and learning leadership in Finland. And Finland public school system is regarded as one of the better school systems in the world. And I had a great opportunity to talk with one of the designers of the current curriculum in the Finnish school system, who mentioned kind of surprisingly that the Finnish national curriculum had been updated at the exact same moment that they were ranked among the highest in the world based on student performance data. This was kind of surprising. You're already the best, or one of the best. Why would you embark on this really complicated learning process? The response was simple, but really quite important. They wanted to adapt. They wanted to continue their learning process, to acknowledge the things that had been working well and look for opportunities to advance their learning programs. This is a really powerful message because it suggests that in order to be a great institution of learning, the institution has to be great at learning. And so that's why we've been really dedicated to this idea of designing the future of learning at ISS through ACE. I've been using this word design a few times and using this word deliberately because it suggests that we're trying to take information, turn it into usable knowledge, and apply that knowledge to create solutions to create a really wonderful learning opportunity for the students here at the school. You know, we've been working at ACE and examining our teaching and learning practices for the last few years, but it wasn't until I watched my wife work that I really kind of understood the beauty of this word design and how it has such an important role for us as educators to think about the way we're redesigning our learning process. My wife is a creative designer, and she has a few principles that I'd like to share with you now. I think these principles can help us think about how to engage with learning and how to design a solution to a problem that's as complex as teaching and learning. First, designers approach problems with creative capacity, meaning they have some faith in themselves that the skills and knowledge that they have already are going to help them solve the problem ahead. Great designers also are able to define a problem without already inferring or predicting a solution. This is really important. Being able to define a problem is probably worth spending most of your time on. If you really understand the problem that you're trying to solve, and in our case, the problem is, how can we create a learning environment and learning experiences for students that's going to better prepare them for the world that we know they're likely to encounter? If we can define this problem really well, without coming already with a bag of tricks and a list of suggestions of how we think it might work, then we're more likely to design a situation based on creative insights, our own inspiration, and applying knowledge that we already have. Great designers also seek out inspiration because somebody else has probably already figured it out. On the other hand, great designers also have a healthy relationship with trends. In my wife's work, there are new fashion trends that come and go each year, and she doesn't throw away the best of what she already does just because a new trend is coming along. I spoke earlier about my experience in Finland, and one of the principals who was teaching in a Finnish school maybe said it best. Hey, we don't throw away textbooks just because there's something new. On the other hand, we are constantly thinking about what are the best practices. It's a really good example, maybe this idea of textbooks. It came up just a week ago in the local newspaper Aftonbladet, where some students were kind of complaining about their preferences of digital versus paper textbooks, which I think illustrates a really important reality. There's some complexity around this. And the last principle of design is that great designers know how to build relationships in order to co-design solutions. So this is one that's been really important for us here at ISS, where we're looking at our learning experiences and our learning goals to try to identify ways to build these things with students rather than for students. So we've been using these principles to help design our future of learning here at ISS. We want to make sure that the impacts of an ISS education are felt in the way that the learners at our school are able to go out and thrive in the world beyond the classroom.